At least 1,300 religious minorities, including Christians, have been murdered this past week by the successor to the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria. Is the new Islamic government carrying out ethnic cleansing, and can it be stopped? Joining me now to discuss this and more, Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, Nina Shea, and founder of Nazarene.org, Father Benedict Kiely. Thank you both for being here. Gunmen loyal to the Sunni government of this interim president, that's what they're calling him, Ahmed al-Sharaa, have been carrying out or accused of carrying out revenge killings against members of Assad's minority Alawite sect. Now, they're along these coastal villages in Syria. Now, this followed what they claimed was a deadly ambush by security personnel. Nina, what is driving this murderous spree in Syria, particularly in these villages?
These people, if they really are Alawites who are being killed, and I'm sure some of them are, many of them are Alawites, were in supporters of Assad, the former president, who was overthrown by the forces that are killing them. The forces that are killing them is now the Syrian army. It used to be, in early December, November, a terrorist group called HTS.
Right.
They have now come into the army, and their leader, al-Sharaa, is now the president. So this is still this coup or this rebellion that's playing out in the streets. And they claim that they were ambushed by the Alawites and some military people were killed, but they're responding in indiscriminate ways. There may be as many as 5,000 we're hearing who have been killed.
Wow.
I did see reports the bodies of men of all ages are piling up in the streets of where this massacre is taking place, and their relatives and loved ones are too afraid to come out and retrieve them.
Yeah. Father Ben, you've spent time there in Syria. Give me a sense of, I mean, we're seeing reports of indiscriminate violence, as Nina mentioned. A Greek Orthodox priest was killed, but the vast majority of those killed appear to be Alawites. About 10% of Syrians belong to that sect, an offshoot of Shiite Islam. Tell us about the Alawites and why are they being specifically targeted? Is this just vengeance against Assad and his holdouts?
It's both, Raymond. Nina's right. The Alawites, of course, President Bashar al-Assad was an Alawite, and so Alawites were in a position of power. So obviously there's hatred for them from the Sunni majority, and they are being massacred. The vast majority of people who've been killed have been Alawites, men, women, and children slaughtered, mass slaughter. It's a pogrom, really. But the other thing, to step back slightly, is they are also hated because they are considered heretics by Orthodox Islam, by Sunni Islam. And so even if they hadn't necessarily been identified with Assad, they're considered heretics, and there's a desire to wipe them out. Christians are, as always, in the middle, and Christians are feeling that, luckily, thank God, there have not been that many Christians killed. There hasn't been a pogrom against them. But I always use the word yet, because what's the old phrase in Syria is, after the Alawites, next the Christians. So after there's a massacre of Alawites, usually the Christians get attacked, and that's what everyone is very, very concerned about.
And you don't believe that 1,300 number we keep hearing, that 1,300 have been slaughtered? You think the number is
there are many reports on the internet and various videos, which some of them are not authenticated, but it seems, no, the numbers are much, much larger, because many people have been killed in their apartments and houses, and their bodies haven't even been discovered. It could be, as Nina said, it could be 5,000.
And Nina, why are they all being, is it because they live in such proximity?
They are living together because in the same communities, because they're small minorities, religious minorities. Even when they were in power, they were small minorities. And the president and his new army are Islamist terrorists, and they had controlled Idlib province for the last 20 years. So the Syrian people and those of us paying attention know what to expect. They're hardline Islamists. They came out of Al-Qaeda. They came out with with the blessing of Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
These are all Al-Qaeda and then ISIS. This guy, the interim president of Syria, al-Shara, I mean, he claims he's going to set up an independent committee to investigate these killings. Nina, do you trust that he will investigate and hold these those who perpetuated them to account?
No, he's the pyromaniac and pretending to be a fireman. The head of the 6th century mosque, Mar Mosa, said that, in this traditional Islamist regime that we've seen throughout the centuries, the Eastern Christians have been treated either as second-class citizens at best, or they've been horribly and cruelly and persecuted and humiliated. And so everyone's on tenterhooks trying to figure out what's going to happen next there.
Father Ben, the violence is the worst in Syria since Assad was overthrown in December. It ended, there was a 13-year devastating civil war which claimed the lives of 600,000 people plus. 12 million were forced to flee their homes. Talk to me a bit about Syria under Assad. You were there, Father Ben. And what was the condition of the religious minority community then, particularly Christians, under the Assad regime?
Well, one will immediately be accused of being an Assad apologist, but we're dealing with facts. The reality is, of course, Assad was not a nice man. As a friend of mine said, they're all monsters. You have to just decide which monster you're going to work with. He was a terrible brute. However, this is a fact, a verifiable fact. Under his regime, Christians and all religious minorities lived in safety. And in fact, during the civil war, when the Assad regime retook places like, for example, Damascus, Christians were safe. They were not having their heads chopped off. I knew a young man from Raqqa who told me that back in 2011, when everything was starting, he was in the streets protesting against Assad. He told me, well, now I'm fully behind Assad. And I said, why? And he said, well, I've seen the alternative. The alternative is you get your head chopped off. So Syria, we also, for our audience, need to remember that Syria is ancient Christianity. There were no less than 5 popes in the 7th century from Syria. As St. John Paul used to say, our beloved John Paul, the church breathes with 2 lungs, the lung of the East and the West. And this is the lung of the East breathing, and we mustn't let that lung be damaged.
Yeah. Nina, I want to talk a moment about the coalition, the merger with the Kurds in the north. They're claiming that this is some kind of unity in the middle of all this turmoil. You have displaced Syrians fleeing en masse at the moment. Your thoughts on, is this actually, is this merger a positive sign?
I don't think it is. I don't have any confidence it's really going to be a merger. I think that the Kurds have a weak hand and they have no choice. And what happens to them once they give up their arms, it means that they're extremely vulnerable and they could be next. It's an ethno and religious conflict going on in Syria.
I want to play this soundbite for both of you and get your reaction. This is a displaced Syrian. Many of them are going to Lebanon, and that's a powder keg itself. And they say the suffering is very high. It is a complete extermination of the Alawite sect and of our brothers the Christians, and our brothers the Shiite. They do not want anyone. Father, I'll start with you. Your reaction. Will the current regime target the Christian population once the Alawites are dealt with?
This is the big question. We're talking about al-Shara. We were joking earlier that he shaved off his beard. He's wearing a suit. But the big question is, will an Islamist leopard change his spots? The jury is out, and the jury is rather nervous, I think. If I was a Christian in Syria, I know them, I speak to them regularly, they are extremely nervous. There's a hope, there's a possibility, but they're very, very nervous about what could come next.
What is the mood among the Christians there, Nina?
Yeah, I think that they're more than nervous. I've talked to 2 patriarchs recently, and they expressed deep concern. I've gotten letters saying that there's, very high levels of anxiety. Sure. And it's not just al-Shara, the president. it's also his coalition, which include extremists. And I've seen this in Nigeria and elsewhere, where the government, who doesn't like the minorities to begin with, doesn't want to deal with the Christians, just lets the extreme fringes take care of them, and he doesn't lift a finger to protect them. And I predict that that's what's going to happen. We're going to see that, because he wants Western support, he wants sanction relief from the United States, and he knows if he goes out and has his army slaughtering the Christians, it's not going to happen. So he's going to let others do it.
The British Foreign Minister, David Lammy, and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio both responded to the violence in Syria, but only Rubio called out the radical Islamists for targeting these religious minorities. I'll first go to Nina, then to Father Ben. Why aren't we hearing more about these atrocities in the West?
Well, I think that it's still considered politically incorrect to talk about this. I think it helps Muslims because you can distinguish extremists from others, from non-extremists. And instead, they are silent on it. Everyone knows it's going on, and they're thinking the worst, that all Muslims are extreme. Father Ben, your reaction?
Well, as I write in my article in The Spectator appearing on Friday, this is a classic example of pathetic Western response that Lammy, the British Foreign Secretary, just expressed horror at the violence. Thanks be to God, Marco Rubio, as you said, identified Islamist extremists, and he mentioned the attacks on religious minorities. So with the new Trump administration, we're getting some honesty. But from the EU, we got an appalling response from the European Union. It's the decaying West once again, happily watching Christians being slaughtered. Meanwhile, while their own countries are being taken over as well.
Well, they're not even watching in some cases. They're not seeing it, Father Ben. But for Twitter and a few other places, you can't find that. I mean, we did the first reporting on Fox on this, and that was the first, I think, of any national media. It's been a complete blackout, and I don't understand why. Maybe it's they don't fully grasp the situation, or maybe they just don't want to report on this. Nina?
Yeah, I don't think they want to report on it. They are uncomfortable with defending Christians. There's particular animus against Christians in certain sectors. They see Christians as the oppressors, and that's, they can't release themselves from that. It
frustrates the narrative.
Yeah.
Nina, before we go, I've got to get your reaction to this, and Father Ben, you can chime in as well. Some stories coming out of China. Underground Catholic Bishop Peter Zhumin was arrested after refusing to pay a $27,000 fine for celebrating a Jubilee Year Mass. The CCP, the communist authorities, claim it was an illegal mass. His whereabouts remain unknown. Meanwhile, Nina, Pope Francis just appointed a Chinese biologist and reported CCP loyalist to the Pontifical Academy for Sciences. Where are we now, and why is the Vatican so silent on the arrest of their own bishops?
Yeah, Bishop Peter Shea, he was doing nothing wrong, even by their own laws. He is an underground priest, but he's still allowed to say Mass. And he was doing it for the Pope. He's praying for the Pope. He has his vibrant diocese, saying the rosary for the Pope's health. And he gets put away in indefinite secret detention. This is about the 7th time since the Vatican Agreement was signed with the Communist Party. It's really atrocious. The Vatican should be speaking up. I understand the Pope's sick, but where is the Secretary of State Parolin? Why isn't he saying something to protest this, to protect his bishops? This was a bishop that was anointed by Pope Benedict.
Yes.
On the other hand, someone, I don't know if it's Pope Francis, who's very, very ill, appointed this new Academy of Papal
biologist.
Who is doing experiments on embryos, embryonic development. That's his specialty, and cloning and so forth. And he was appointed to the Chinese Academy of Sciences by the government of China. It's a rare privilege. It means tenure, lifetime tenure. And you don't do this just because you have on merit. You do this because it could be he's very smart
he's a party loyalist.
But he's a party loyalist. And he's someone who's going to use this position in the academy, the Pontifical Academy in Rome, not only to spy, but to influence, to shape the narrative about China wherever he goes. And he's going to leverage that in the United Nations and in Europe, the European Commission and so forth, European Union. So it's very dangerous to have someone like that who is beholden to the Chinese Communist Party.
But Nina and Father Ben, we've got a number of bishops who have been appointed by the Chinese authorities that the Vatican gave rubber stamps to. I mean, they're very quick to react to spending cuts here in the U.S. Congress. But what does it tell you? That there's absolute silence when it comes to the arrest of a loyal bishop just saying Mass.
Well, Raymond, you've been speaking about this for years. Nina, of course, is an expert in this area. I think this Vatican-China agreement is one of the greatest scandals in the life of the church in the last probably half a century. Though many people like Lord David Alton and others who've always been quite quiet and very respectful, have spoken up because Chinese Catholics, faithful Chinese Catholics, are being persecuted, another part of the persecuted church. And you ask who's making these appointments. Well, we have to wonder if the Pope is so sick, as he is, we know, who is making the Cardinal, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, is the man who made this agreement. Is he pulling the strings now? It's a very shocking thing. We must speak up with great respect for the Pope, but we must speak up about our brethren who are being persecuted for the faith. They've been faithful to the Pope. That's one of the reasons why the underground church is an underground church, because they were faithful to the Pope. But now they feel that the rug is being pulled from under them for being faithful.
Yeah. Nina, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, Cardinal Parolin, let's not forget, was the architect of this agreement that was signed in 2018, the Vatican-China agreement. So he doesn't want to admit that it's been a complete failure.
Well, and one wonders, why are we seeing these appointments of Chinese apparatchiks to major Vatican dicasteries and academies? It's very bizarre and not hard to unravel. But, Father and Nina, I'll leave you with this. I do believe, and I've been talking to a number of cardinals over the last few days, this is going to be a major sticking point, and I think an issue going into the next conclave. They recognize, the bishops and cardinals at large recognize there is a problem here with this China-Vatican pact, and the fact that it's been kept secret, and I do believe it will shape whoever the next pope will be. We will leave it there. You can find more of Nina Shea's reporting on the persecution of Christians worldwide by visiting hudson.org and follow Father Benedict Kiely. He's at Nazarene.org. Thank you both.